Patrick, welcome. I wish I was contacting you from Climate Pledge Arena, where
Yeah, right.
we did have you put together a plan to maybe go down to Seattle and have a look at where what it was like as they were, starting their home
Yeah,
games, the start of what we hope is a great rivalry. But of
yeah.
course, corporate policy meant we're not allowed to go travel to the States. You're stuck in your broom closet. I
My
love it.
wonderful
Yeah.
office.
And we're doing what we've been doing for almost 2 years now. So let's talk about the Canucks. Before we get into the game with the Kraken and maybe look ahead, you started this great new feature this week that runs on
Right.
Thursdays. You can get it online. You can get it in print if you
Yeah.
if you want, which looks ahead to what's happening with the Canucks. I want to talk a little bit about where they've come. Again, I without getting too far into the weeds, I've actually started to cull some of the things I see on Twitter because I don't think that social media is indicative of the general populace, both in terms of sanity and hockey Canuck takes, and those two may even be intermingled. But um, when you look at the conditions for the Canucks to start this road trip, or to start the season being on the road for so long, um, I don't necessarily think it's been a bad start for them yet. Some people are overly negative. What's your take on the way things have gone so far?
I think it's as I noted, setting up yesterday's or no, in covering yesterday's game. Um, the game on Tuesday was terrible. There's no doubt about it. Buffalo, like that's a sad sack team, sad sack organization, uh, and they outplayed the Canucks badly. And the players were embarrassed. The coach was embarrassed. Um, I think it's one of those ones, that happens all the time on bad teams, right? And then they talk about being able needing to respond, et cetera, et cetera. And, sometimes they do bounce back right away. It's about what they're able to sustain. I mean, good on the Canucks. They played really well in Chicago. I mean, I still have concerns about the way they're creating their offense. But they won. They did enough. And their goalie played well. They played pretty well defensively. Um, I think the overall picture is that they're having a decent road trip. Like I said, they need to have a 500 road trip. Or you should have a 500 road trip. Looking at the 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 lineup of opponents, and they're 2-2-1 right now. And if they win, I think Seattle's going to be pretty tough at home opener, so on and so on and so on. Having had 2 days actually to finally be at home, the Canucks are at the end of a reasonably tough road trip that's taken them all over the continent. But say they win or they get a tie out of tomorrow, like that's an exceptional record. I think they're already in a position where, they've sort of done the minimum. They got a couple wins, they got a tie. You like I said, you'd like to have a 500 road trip. If they lose tomorrow, that's not a 500 road trip, but it's points in 3 of 6 games. I think that's fine. They've done okay, but how they progress forward is still important because.
Oh, of course it is. But
Yeah.
just let me jump in here.
Yeah.
I'll challenge you on something. You said like they stunk, they were embarrassed. Bad teams do that. I would counter that good teams do that as well sometimes.
Right.
So like you're looking at a 6-game road trip to start the season. Your 2 star players didn't have a full camp. There's questions around Pedersen's performance so far,
Mm-hmm.
and Quinn Hughes is banged up. Yet they are at 500, and a 6-game road trip is tough for any team. Um, so, I just, again, it's glass half full, glass half empty. And you talk about progression. We have to remember the goal for this team is playoffs. The goal for this team is not yet Stanley Cup.
Right.
And we can argue about that, the bigger picture, where the GM has the vision of the ownership or whatever it is. But in order to get to the Stanley Cup, you have to get into the playoffs.
Yes.
And get some experience there first. So, I mean, obviously, it's a long, long way to go, and I don't think people should panic over Pedersen's performance,
Right.
or the fact that the team's 500. Hasn't been the toughest road trip, as you pointed out. Like, it's not like they've played, Tampa and Vegas, and it's kind of, this is a standard long road trip against middle of the road opposition, and they're middle of the road. So
Yeah.
it's more about, do you see the potential that you get your stars? We saw some life from Besser after he missed the start of the season. Do you see some signs with the new guys, the way they've come in, Ekman Larson, Garland, even people talking about that Pullman's been a little bit of a pleasant surprise in maybe not in every game. Do you see the potential, though, that this team can grow and be a much bigger force than they were last season?
I think that's an interesting way to frame it, because we sort of think of like the idea of moving forward or going up, the growing. Just, are they more than they appear to be? And I still have a tough time looking at this defense and saying overall, this is a defense that's going to get demonstrably better than it already is. Now, Oliver Ekman-Larsson's been fine. I think he's had a nice start. I don't think the odds of him becoming the player he was 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, when he was one of the top players in the NHL and wasn't talked about enough because he played in a total hockey backwater, I don't think that's likely. But if your sort of standard is, can he be better than Alex Edler? Because Alex Edler played a lot for this team and was getting old and slowing down, and he did his best, but in the end, you knew you needed to upgrade that spot. I think that already is the case. I think he's already looking steadier. We haven't seen him have huge, terrible moments where he's just looked completely at loss at sea, the way Tyler Myers has looked often. But that's good. Jack Rathbone is coming along well. That's good. So there's sort of things there, but you still, like, Tucker Pullman is not. I don't find him terribly inspiring. Kyle Burrows has been a good story so far, but let's be honest, he's in his late mid 20s.
He's Troy Stecher 2.0
at best. I mean, I'm a big fan of Troy Stecher, but in the end, he's a sixth defenseman, right? Like, you shouldn't be talking about. They have plenty of options for sixth defenseman. Do you truly have a number one? Can Quinn Hughes become a number one? And he himself has talked about the need to get better defensively. It's been a talking point from his teammates. They say he wants to be better defensively. So now he's got to prove it that he's going to be better defensively. We'll see. I mean, part of his game, of course, is just simply having the puck on his stick. And we saw that in Chicago. I mean, that was such a sort of triumphant statement from him, saying, no, this is who I am. This is who I'm going to be. I mean, that's exactly what the Canucks need every night. On offense, yeah, you've already mentioned it. They need Pettersson to be better. He's been not, mediocre, I think, by his standards. Connor Garland is such a great addition. I mean, everybody's, there is no doubt that this is a fun player. This is a player who's going to make a difference for this team. There's a reason why Canucks coaching staff, coach management were excited when they got him in the trade this summer. Not even without getting into sort of the manner of getting him, they got a great player. Like, that was the kind of, it was the classic, if you're assessing a trade, who gets the best player? Well, the Canucks got the two best players. There was no comparing the actual players in the trade. So Garland's been a huge contributor. Yeah, this team is definitely going to be better than last year's team. I mean, I think there's some already early reasons to suggest that, yeah, even just looking at some of the numbers underneath, we're still early. It's only 5 games. You really need a 10 to 20 game sample size to really understand what's going on. But there are sort of suggestions that, yeah, overall defensively, this team's going to be smarter, which is good and everything they needed. But at the end of the day, they also need that offense to bounce back to what it was in that 2019-20, where at least it was exciting to, had a threat to score. It wasn't one of the league's best offenses or anything like that, but it had dangerous elements to it. And, that to me is what you need to look for to see. You've already mentioned Brock Besser, like, how it's a big year for him in terms of contract. There's top end improvement. Niels Höglander is being looked to be kind of this fill-in guy towards the bottom. Can he bring a third line up on his own? They got a goal last night. The fourth line, you just need the fourth line to tread water. So that it's a team that absolutely should be competing for the playoffs. The progression they're leaning on is mostly on how their younger players continue to get better. And, Elias Pettersson and Quinn Hughes should still have at least another year or two of realistically looking at sort of past trends of improvement. Like, they're going to hit they still aren't quite at their peak yet. So, yeah, I mean, there is lots of opportunity for it. Now, can they do it?
You talk about young players, though. Obviously Podkolzin scratched in Chicago. Now, again, people looking at YouTube links of him in the KHL and like, oh my God, this guy's a beast. He's a
Yeah.
finalist for the Calder already. Shouldn't be surprised that we've got a rookie adjusting to a new
Yeah.
culture, adjusting to a new language, adjusting to new teammates, new style, everything, like adjusting to everything. That it's going to take a while out of the box. Your thoughts on where you see Podkolzin going the rest of the season?
Well, I think they've been, pretty deliberate in dealing with him. It's been they don't want him to sort of feel pressure to be anything in particular. They just want him to play. Um, but it's taken some adjustment for him. I mean, it's interesting. Like I said, it's early. He's only played 4 games because he was scratched last night. But in terms of his ability with the puck, there's been glimpses of what he brings. He's a possession player. Like, he's a guy that puts the puck and gets the puck in the spaces you want. He plays down low. He's near the net. He got that great goal in Philly. He's a guy that does all those things. I think the question then becomes, how does it work at the other end of the ice? How does he mesh with his teammates? How does he mesh with this? This is the thing I find funny, and at some point I am going to sit down and ask, because everyone says, "Oh, everyone plays the same system," but then everyone says, "Well, it takes a while to get used to the new system. So which is it?" You know. And I think really what they really mean is that it takes time to get used to how your teammates execute. That everyone plays in a very similar style. There's not a it's not like soccer where there's a wide range of tactical possibilities.
Yeah, it used to be if you're playing the Devils, you had to completely prepare
Yeah,
for a different team than if you were playing,
the Red Wings
the
or what?
Penguins.
Yeah,
Yeah, at the time.
exactly.
So
Whereas everyone's roughly the same. There's not a whole lot. Maybe because that's just the game's so fast. There's not like there's actually a lot of space for um, tactical variety. It's just the
our
puck's
old
there,
friend
puck's
and
there.
colleague Tony Gallagher a decade ago was talking about how the biggest problem with the NHL was the quality of the coaches, that they were all
Yeah,
too good. That
yeah,
the games were overcoached,
yeah,
that there weren't
yeah,
mistakes, that no one was
yeah,
taking a risk.
yeah,
There's certainly an element of that in today's NHL. So it's literally, if you have the better players to plug in those
yeah.
positions, then you'll win. And if you don't, you won't, because there's not much leeway around how you can individually manipulate your team.
I've often joked. I think the best thing the NHL could ever do would be to ban coaches from the bench. Just
Absolutely.
make them sit upstairs, and let the players figure it out. But anyway, the point is that Podkolzin in the end is still getting used to his new team, and I think he's been fine. I was a little surprised they actually scratched him last night. This is not, but it's also not the first time Travis Green has done this and said, "I want my young guys to sit upstairs and watch the game. They want to see what's going on." And there is an argument for it. I think he's a guy that's, I don't know if he necessarily needs that because he thinks the game so well. He's a smart guy. He knows the game. But it doesn't hurt, especially early in the season. It doesn't hurt. And, there is an element, I think it's smart in terms of actual just trying to manage their load a little bit. I mean, hockey doesn't manage load nearly smart enough, especially when you consider how they do it in basketball. Uh, that doesn't recognize some of the options you have with a roster when it's not just 20 guys, it's 23 guys, or even looking at your minor league call-ups. But I can see the case for just sitting down, like, yeah, he's played a lot of hockey. He's just never played, even in KHL, you don't play this many games at this pace, at this rate. So, give him a chance to catch his breath. I mean, the one, speaking of catch your breath, I mean, Jack Rathbone is a guy that probably could use a break. Even though he hasn't played a ton of hockey in the last couple of seasons. I mean, that was something they were talking about his rookie season last year. It was something that Canucks brass constantly brought up with me, was that if you actually look at his career record, he hasn't even actually played that. I mean, he didn't play a ton in college either. I mean, college schedules are short anyway. He only played a couple. He played a prep year, an overage prep year, before he went to Harvard. And those don't have huge long schedules, so he's actually not played that many games. The guy's practiced a lot, but he's not played that many games. So there is sort of that argument for them not wanting to or wanting to give him as many games, in a way that preseason was kind of a bonus season for him. But it'll be interesting, because there's a guy who probably does need a break. if you're actually smart about this, you're going to rotate through all your guys and give them all a break here and there. But for now, I guess the Podkolzin thing makes a little bit of sense anyway.
So you're not in Seattle, where it should be a really fun atmosphere when they open the season on Saturday, but you will be able to go when the Canucks get back home, which news came this week. They're allowed a full building. There's all sorts of things to consider there. The only thing, I don't know the intricate nuts and bolts, but I can tell you this from experience, looking at other venues around the world when they opened it up, go early, right? There's different layers now, and whether you think you're going to pop into the Shark Club and have a couple of beers and some snacks before you head to the rink, like even getting into those those establishments is going to be a different procedure. So what are you expecting when this team comes home? How much of a lift do you think it's going to be for these guys to finally, after so long, play in front of a full building at Rogers Arena?
Oh, I think it'll be a big lift. JT Miller talked about it last week in Philly. Basically saying that he looked up. He just had a moment where he just sort of looked up and heard all the fans in the stands heading to overtime, and just the energy and the noise and the kind of he said it gave him some chills, and I think reminded him how lucky he is, and I think that's going to be true of all of these guys, and especially the players who played here before. There's a real meaning for them. I mean, they got newer players. There's always that new sort of new car feeling, I think, for them probably as well. But a guy like Bo Horvat or Brock Besser, Thatcher Demko, guys who have a connection here already. Being able to get back on that ice with the home fans, cheering for in the ways that they're used to. Elias Pettersson's the same way. I mean, all these guys, it's going to mean a lot to them. It will give them an extra kick. I imagine, at least in the short term, give them that same reminder that Miller was referring to, that this is it's a special job. It's a special thing they get to do, and it's been a tough time, and people worked hard to make this happen, and rhetorically, they'll do their best to sort of reward that faith and effort, I guess.
So this time next week, what do you think the storylines are going to be?
About the same. Honestly, sort of plugging along, win a game they shouldn't win, lose a game they shouldn't lose. I think things will be tight. I think that, Travis Green said it yesterday, I think, after the game. He said that his team needs, they're going to win games by playing hard, by limiting mistakes, and obviously he has some high octane players and he needs them to be their best players, but the overall picture is one that they're playing tighter, I think, than they were, say, last year. I think he needs the game to. I think he wants the players themselves to sort of understand the game. They need to do a few things first before they can really start growing themselves through the season. I think the question is really, can they continue to sort of have some control on their own end, get good goaltending, and then can they actually find a little more at the other end of the ice? Because that's what I'm talking about now, and I don't think that's going to change.
Well, thanks, Patrick. We'll talk to you next week. And I've been smirking through this because it's like, you're not a glass half empty. You're not a glass half full. You're sort of like, hey, there's a glass with some water in it. It's just like, finds its level. Let's see where this goes.
Yeah, well, when you grow up in this town, you've seen a lot of Canucks hockey in your life, and you just know never to get ahead of yourself, and also don't get too low because it could get worse.
Absolutely. All right, Patrick. Thanks for your insight. You can sign up for our Canucks newsletter. Please do. You go to theprovince.com, vancouversun.com. You get our stuff delivered to you every game day. We have several other newsletters deliver you our sports news, all the great stuff that Patrick, Ben Kuzma, JJ Adams, Steve Ewan, right? We got to stop now because this is at the limit for our videos. But man, what a Saturday, honestly. Like, I'm a big college football geek. As you know, I'm a big EPL fan. Liverpool, Manchester United, that's on Sunday. But Saturday, get up, watch EPL in the morning. There's college football all day. You got, baseball playoffs. The Lions play, the Whitecaps play, the Canucks play, first game in Seattle. thankfully, it's going to pour down all weekend. What else is new? But it gives us license to get out of yard work and just spend the day in front of the
There you
TV.
go.
And I mean the day from like 4:30 a.m. until like 11 o'clock at night. There's stuff to watch. So
I hope you. I hope you survive, Paul. Let's just put it that way.
yeah, I will, but not just barely.